I can't say I've ever thought to myself, wow, I really wish ARK had a larger, angrier mammoth. But that seems to be exactly what Garuga thought the game needed, and they were right, and Wildcard obviously agreed. But was this giant proboscidean real, or has it come from the realm of fantasy? Let's find out. The family of herbivorous cetaceans are connected with the pachydermata of the land by one of the most wonderful of all the extinct creatures with which geologists have made us acquainted, the Curiosities of Science stated in 1859. They were talking about the Deinotherium. Surely this creature must have lived in the water, they surmised, where its tusks would not have gotten in the way so much and the weight of its incredibly large head would have been supported. The Deinotherium has a long and mixed history in the annals of human research and interpretation. Often it has been pushed aside as a less interesting, failed evolutionary experiment in the elephant family, not as interesting or charismatic as the woolly mammoth. Other times it has been interpreted in ways that seem slightly bonkers when viewed through a modern perspective. It is thought that the first identified remains were discovered in the 17th century in an area appropriately known as the Field of Giants, near Lyon in France. A French surgeon took the bones he had found and exhibited them across France and Germany, claiming they were the remains of a giant French king. Sadly for him, but luckily for us, the ruse didn't last all that long, and the bones were eventually handed over to the French National Museum of Natural History. In the late 18th century, researchers recognised that the bones had belonged to a large animal that was similar to a mammoth, rather than to a gigantic human. Unfortunately for the Deinotherium, that was the last sensible suggestion made until 1829. On the more reasonable end of the unusual identification spectrum, there was a theory that the creature must have been an enormous tapir. And on the wilder end, there was a suggestion that it was a quadrupedal saurian or sea cow that used its tusks to anchor itself to the seafloor while it slept. The Deinotherium was neither of these things and was, as suggested in 1829, a member of the Proboscidea family, of which the elephant is the only remaining living genus. They lived from around the Middle Miocene until the early Pleistocene for a period of around 20 million years. Their range spread across Europe and East Africa all the way to the east of the Indian subcontinent. Deinotherium was named in 1829 by Johann Jakob von Kaup, who had been studying a fossil skull and mandible discovered in Germany. The name comes from the ancient Greek word deinos, meaning terrible, and therion, meaning beast. At the time, it was thought that Deinotherium was an evolutionary link between sloths and mastodons, but further discoveries and research helped solidify Deinotherium's position within the Proboscidea order. Throughout the long history of dinotherid research, 31 different species have been described and assigned to the family. The number of these that are officially recognised varies, but 3 species are most commonly considered valid. 1 from Europe, the 2nd from Africa, and the 3rd from Asia. Fully grown, they would have likely been 3.6 to 4 metres or 12 to 13 foot tall at the shoulder, but Proboscidea is a tall family. Modern African bush elephants average 3 to 3.36 metres or 10 to 11 foot tall at the shoulder, and mammoths were 3.8 to 4.2 metres or 12.5 to 13.8 foot tall. An adult Deinotherium would likely have weighed between 9 and 13 tonnes. The general anatomy of Deinotherium was fairly similar to that of a modern elephant, with a few key differences. Their pillar-like limbs were longer and more slender, suggesting they had an agile mode of locomotion that allowed them to easily travel across open landscapes. Their necks were more flexible, and their head was positioned in a higher, more raised position. It is the tusks that are the biggest difference. Unlike elephants and mammoths, whose tusks grow from the upper incisors, Deinotherium's tusks grew down and curved back from the lower incisors. In fact, the upper incisors, as well as the upper and lower canines, were missing entirely. These tusks are one of the most enigmatic features of the Deinotherium, and much research has been done into their purpose. It is unlikely that they were used for digging or for anchoring themselves to seabeds, and they are not exclusively found in one sex. The most recent study suggests that the wear marks present on the tusks show that they were used to remove branches that got in the way of feeding. The skull of the Deinotherium provides evidence that they did have some form of elephant-like proboscis or trunk, but the exact shape and size has long been debated. And with no soft tissue remains, the matter remains open to interpretation and speculation. Having inhabited such a large area of the planet, the habitat of the Deinotherium would have been diverse. Their anatomy suggests that they would have been frulivorous browsers. Frulivorous means eating leaves. I learnt that today, and now you've learnt it too. They likely inhabited open woodlands and ate leaves from the tree canopy. Ultimately, it was likely their frulivorous diet that spelt the end for the Deinotherium. As the Miocene came to an end and the global climate was changing and becoming cooler and more arid, global ecosystems began to change from forests to grasslands. A pocket of Deinotherium clung on in Africa until the Pliocene, but this area would change to savanna and the traditional Deinotherium habitats vanished. The Deinotherium brings a large, super-aggressive herbivore to the ARK universe. It looks amazing, and I can only hope that someday someone will do a TLC for the mammoth to get it looking as impressive. Thank you so much for watching. If you've made it this far, make sure to comment parasaur below, and I will see you in the ARK. Take care.